Talk about not being ready. Oh, let me plug in this microphone. I hope it doesn't mess everything up. I hope you guys can hear me now. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Let's start over here. Hopefully you can hear me. Okay, got that out of the way. So Anthony's not going to be here, but he left us a question. Anthony says he can't make it today, and he says howdy to everybody. And he says he's got a question. If an old trumpet has bad compression, can a player make it play notes correctly? And he follows that up with, I mean, a good player like myself, modest like myself, and then he puts LOL at the end. Yes, you know what? The compression thing is, how do I explain this? That stuff matters, but it matters at a higher level. Okay? That stuff matters at a higher level. And what do I mean by that? Because that sounds offensive, right? So, you know, I was talking to my son today about composition, and we were talking about this scenario, the scene in that movie Amadeus, right? And Salieri writes a composition for Mozart, and Mozart, and then the emperor is like playing it, right? And so at the end of their meeting, the emperor wants to give Mozart the score. Mozart says, nope, already got it here. And he says, sits down and starts to play it. And now let's keep in mind, this is not historic, right? This story is fiction. But it's a great way to see how composition works, right? So ignoring the fact that he was talking about Salieri's work, right? Ignore that part. He's playing the piece and he goes, that really doesn't work very well, does it? Right? He's playing the piece and he gets to a section and it's not. And what I'd like to tell my composition students is that oftentimes people just don't finish the work. Right? So what do I mean by finish? And this will connect to the issue that we're talking about here with compression. If you're in the writing process, right? We have this creative output phase. And stuff starts spilling out onto the page or into the computer, however it is that we're composing. And then the next step is supposed to be that you go back at this stuff and you say, like what Mozart said, this really doesn't work, does it? And you work on that, right? And you work on, the better composers are doing that at a greater detail level. So at the lowest level, you're looking at the notes, right? Do the notes fit? Do the notes work? Do the rhythms work? But as you get more advanced, you're looking at more subtle things and more detailed things. Like, should it be staccato there? Or should it be, you know what I mean? And so when we're talking about the compression on the trumpet itself, it's one of those detailed things. And the truth is that most musicians never experience music to a level high enough to know the difference between a horn that has good compression and a good horn that doesn't have good compression. Okay, so most people just don't, you know, and when I say most people, I'm not saying most pros. I think most pros do hear the difference and feel the difference. But it's at such a subtle level, right? Now, of course, if it's leaking really, really bad, but that's not usually what we're talking about when we talk about compression. I mean, I've told you guys stories about a guy that I played with in college, and he was a great jazz player, right? And he had Band-Aids on his horn to keep it together. And just to give you an example of what I'm talking about, I still haven't gotten this horn fixed. It's still, well, let's see if you can get that. It's still, which way am I going? I hope you can see that. Okay, there you can see it. Right? You can see that's not connected. And that means air is escaping. Right? There's no way just putting that on there without a weld that there's no air coming out of it. Right? So, and that's why we concern ourselves with compression, is because air is escaping. Right? Well, here's one that's escaping bad. Right? How bad is it? You see what I'm saying? How bad is it? It's not that bad. I could even take it off like that. It's off now. Actually, I don't even know how this is going to work. Let's try this. Let's, as an experiment for our Q&A today, do an experiment where the tubing is almost off. Okay, I don't know if you can see that. The tubing is almost off. You see how much of a gap there is? There's a lot of air escaping out of that. Now, let's see how bad it is. Oh, it's pretty bad. That was the experiment, and the experiment failed. It sounds like a kazoo. Now let's pull it. Let's keep the experiment going. Let's pull it just a little bit out. Right, and I'll even put my finger here to make sure it doesn't go back in. Just a little bit out. Okay, so so that gives you the answer. I don't mind being made a fool of if I find the truth, right? I am a fool. I'm a fool for the truth. How about that? So yes, there must be some kind of seal if when I put it back in there, it's still, right? So anyway, hello Javier. Yes, I'm doing fine. I hope everybody else is doing fine. I moved my monitor, and the camera would have been so high, I'd be like this all the time. So I put the camera down beneath. So when I'm looking up at the monitor, it makes it look like I'm looking up above the camera. So, which I am. Still getting stuff fixed in here. All right, so Mr. Walker says it's like playing with the spit valve open. That's correct. Anyway, I never tried to play with the pieces like sticking off of the horn. But that tells you a lot, right? Because when people talk about compression, right, I'm sure this horn doesn't have a lot of compression. What they usually do is they'll put the slide out and see how much of a it makes, right? And I'm going to be right next to the mic. Here's my mic right here. I'm going to put the slide out. There's a tiny bit of compression in there, but it's not like a new horn. You hear that? I hope you can hear that. Let's get it on the mic. On this slide, maybe. Okay. Not much compression there. Let's see about the other slides. This one. This one has more compression. Okay. This one I can't move. So, anyway. So this horn obviously has very little compression. Like traditionally what people are talking about when they talk about compression, right? I don't think there's anything wrong with this horn, and it's got very little compression on that third valve. So yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm sure if I had a B-flat trumpet like that had no problems with it, I would sound better. But better than what? Javier says, I recommend you all to listen to this great Argentinian jazz folklore guitar player, Luis Salinas. I think you mentioned him before. He can pull off some dope chords. Would make Joe Pass come out of his grave. Hello, Gabriel. Nice to see you guys again. Yeah. Yeah. So, what else is up? I'm supposed to be making chutney today. We shop what we call talk about the bargain bin, right? And they take like the almost rotten fruit and stuff like that and put it in a bag, and you buy that for cheaper than what you would buy the new stuff. And yesterday they had bags and bags of tomatoes. And my wife's favorite kind of chutney is tomato chutney. So, and she's been so busy lately, I volunteered to make that for her. I don't know what I'm getting into. But anyway, so, not that that has anything to do with trumpet. But that's what I'll be doing after I sign off today, is getting that started. Any questions? There's one. Javier says, Eddie, you use the first 12 tonalization pattern exercise to study chromatic scales. That's correct. Just the 12. And the reason why we do just the 12 is because it's redundant. Those are studies that you can do that are covered in other areas, and it doesn't make sense to me to do it twice. That's why. And I don't actually think there's a lot of benefit to those anyway. So, Gabriel says, Eddie, I have a question on foot tap. My teacher insists on it when I play. Is it so important? I don't, here's the thing. I have times with my students when I tell them, no, don't tap your foot. And then I have other times when I say, please tap your foot. So here's something as a teacher, right? As a teacher, I might have my students tap their foot so I can see how they're thinking, right? If their foot is going like this, so like bump, bump, bump. So let's say Petrushka, right? Right? I can see that what the way they're feeling the music is wrong. So there's times when I will have them tap their foot so they can communicate what it is that they're thinking. Does that make sense? Um, and yes, so I would do that. But then there's other times when, because their rhythms are in bad shape, like for example, if you're going to be playing with the metronome, I think it's better, let's be clear about this, when you're playing with the metronome and you're struggling with that, okay, let's be clear about that. If you're struggling with playing with the metronome, then you should not tap your foot. You should instead get your beat from the metronome. A lot of times people tap their foot and they get their rhythm from their tap. Instead of being an expression of your rhythm, and instead of going output, they're using their foot as input, which makes no sense if the metronome is on. I hope that makes sense. Hello, Mary. Yes, we make a lot of chutney here, actually. So in South Africa, chutney is just a regular, it's more common over there than tomato sauce, in my opinion. You'll have rows and rows and rows of chutney and like one little section with tomato sauce. And for those of you who are Americans, tomato sauce is ketchup. So, neocolors, I keep saying it like it's, never mind. Okay. New colors is really what that is, right? I keep wanting to pronounce it Spanish. Hi, I just wanted to say thank you. You're welcome. Last week you gave me advice about non-muscular embouchure. I managed to fix it already by free buzzing and working on your Trumpet Pyramid daily routine book. Woohoo! That's what we like, right? That's what we like to hear. That's what we like to hear. Now, if you did have a non-muscular embouchure before, then your range will have gone down like overnight, because this is a different way to play, right? But here's what I always tell my students when they're making a change like that. That old way is like a ladder that has a limit, right? You can only climb that far. In fact, I do this sharing thing, right? Let me put this up and I'll show you what I used to draw for my students. I haven't drawn this in a long time. You know, I've been teaching so long now that I have like eras. And I know that sounds almost conceited, but I have eras. Not errors. Yeah, there's plenty of errors too. Eras, like E-R-A-S. Okay. Let's clear that. So, I always used to do, when I'm talking about this muscular embouchure as opposed to what I've called it different things. I've called it manipulation embouchure. I've called it inflammation embouchure. Let's use a different color. Okay, so I would draw two ladders. And I'll tell them that this is the ladder that they're on. And the problem is, that's as far as the ladder goes, right? Over here is, so this is the manipulated embouchure. Woo! This is the manipulation embouchure. Over here is the muscular embouchure, and we're going to put arrows up here to indicate that there's no limit to how far you can go on this one. We're going to put an infinity sign even. Okay? And when you get on this ladder, you can just keep going and going and going and going and going, right? There's no limit. No limit to your range, no limit to your endurance. All the limits have been taken off. So let's say you're a student at this level. You've gone as far as you can go. Let's change colors here. Let's say you've gone as far as you can go. You're up here and really you've tried everything and you can't do it. So you come down and you go over here and you start up this ladder. And even though you might be at this point, at this level, which is worse than where you were here, the potential where you can go from there is limitless. And that's my drawing with a mouse. I should get one of those pads so I can like draw stuff. I hope that makes sense. So, yeah, that's how I look at that. I used to draw that chart over and over and over again on the back of the students' music. So Javier says the mouthpiece placement exercise is great. You should look for that video in Eddie's channel. Yeah, you know what? I made that one up for my braces students. You know how braces students, when someone gets braces, they've got to go through that switch, right? And what happens a lot with the braces students is that they want to try to play the way they played before, but that's not going to happen, right? And for some students, getting the braces actually a very good thing. Very, very good thing. Because it forces them to not, not manipulate. We were talking about the manipulation embouchure, right? So Neo says that that's what helped him the most was the mouthpiece placement. I believe that. Hello, Dave Stubbington. He says, I've been struggling with the player level pedal tone exercises for a few weeks. Any advice I could offer on these exercises would be greatly appreciated. You know, a lot of times when we struggle with the pedal tones, it's a pivot issue. And a lot of times, when people pivot, they think that the pivot is straight up and down, right? But the guy who discovered it, maybe he discovered it, but the guy who's most famous for teaching pivot, he never said it was up and down. It's actually, so you can go up to the right and down to the left, and to different degrees, right? Or up to the left and down to the right. So what happens a lot of times is that for the pedal tones, you might have an angle which is just not conducive for getting a note out at all. Sometimes you go to that bottom note, and I'm going to try to do a wrong angle on purpose. Let's do D. I'm trying to do it wrong, and it's not happening. Okay, I'm getting the wrong angle now. I'm doing the opposite of what I would normally do. Now, if I go the other direction, it has that full, clear sound, right? So, the player one has the all three fingerings for the pedal tones, right? And so I would go as far as to say that That's part of the reason why we do these pedal tones, is to learn how to adjust, not just the angle, right? Not just the pivot, but adjust everything physically to make stuff work. It's in a lot of ways. Now there are other benefits to doing pedal tones besides this, but in a lot of respects, the pedal tones are a lot like lip buzz. They're not something we would do in public, not normally. You know, I did see I used to play every once in a while with Bill Watrous, the trombone player, and he used to do this shtick where he would um, lip buzz and play his trombone, and it was like a story of someone swatting a bee or something, or a fly or something. So that's a rare example of someone who's actually doing lip buzz in a performance. Okay, but it's really, really, really rare. You'll never, not to my knowledge, ever have a piece of written music that says, "Hey, do lip buzz here." And the same thing is true, not as true, but because there are some pedal tone things that people do, but the same thing is also true for pedal tones. It's not something we would normally do in public, right? But it's something, so that's part of what makes them similar. Another thing that makes them similar is that part of the reason why we do the pedal tones is to give our mind something to chew on a little bit. If we make our mind, um, you know, uh, work through that problem and find what works, then that's worth more than any teacher could ever give you. You couldn't pay someone enough money to figure to give you the benefit that you would get from learning how to play pedal tones. So now you specifically asked for advice. My advice would be try everything. Try different angles, try different pressure, um, try different positions inside your mouth. That's the whole point of most of these exercises anyway. It's like a playground for your mind to explore. So yeah. Neo says, my range was very dependent on luck, sometimes to G3, but not consistent. Yeah, you know what? When you have a manipulated embouchure, the problem with that is you can't control the swelling, right? The the demands of the performance prevent you from doing what you need to regulate that swelling. The demands of the rehearsal take away that uh, that opportunity you would have normally to regulate that swelling. So Javier says my range depended on lip swelling before. Well, same thing we're talking about, right? Muscular embouchure fixed that problem. I don't hate to rely on pressure or smashing my lip. I think you mean you hate to rely on pressure. Oh, I don't have. There it is. He corrected it. I don't have to rely on pressure and smashing my lip. That's right. That's exactly right. You're welcome, Dave. Good question. Javier says, should I use the deeper cut mouthpiece on harder days of the routine? That's what I used to do. I use the deeper one now all the time. But I say that, but right now I have my medium cup in. But yeah, normally I would use the deeper mouthpiece all the time when I'm practicing. But there was a time when that's what I did, exactly what I did. I would put the deeper one on the biggest day, the hardest day, and then the other two I would put the medium. I would never practice with a shallow cup at home. I don't like that sound. So, any other questions? Great to see you guys. I wanted to apologize again. I don't know if, Gabriel, I don't know if you watched last week's, but I couldn't remember your name. I'm so embarrassed. So I kept thinking Gilbert for some reason. I guess because it starts with G. But I'm apologizing officially right here. Any other questions? Right before we started today, I was working on a new composition. So Gabriel asks, Eddie, I've heard about closing the throat issue. Is it possible to really close the throat? Yes, indeed, it's possible. And in fact, there's some people that teach you to close the throat. That's something I try to stay way, way away from. In fact, knowing how psychology works, I actually don't even address it by name in my lessons. I will typically tell them stuff more on the positive side. In other words, positive reinforcement type stuff, I guess, to try them to think in a different direction. Instead of telling them to don't tighten the throat, you'll rarely ever hear me to tell a student, don't tighten the throat. Don't close off the throat. I don't tell students that. What I do is tell them the converse of that, which is to play like you're singing, to play like you're yawning, stuff like that. But to tell you the truth, a lot of that is just not necessary with my students if they're doing the routine. Because the routine pretty much prevents that from happening. And in any of those routines, even the short ones, help prevent that from happening because the emphasis is on the air. And as long as you're pushing air, see, I think that the thing with the throat, that people like to address that as if it's a physical problem. It's not a physical problem. It's a mental problem. It's a issue of body tension. And body tension, in my opinion, body tension is not a physical problem. It's a mental problem. It's when we have conflicting thoughts, then we have conflicting muscle movement. It's our thoughts that move our body, and if we have conflicting thoughts, one of the examples I like to give is someone who is throwing a ball but holding back at the same time. Now, what would cause someone to throw the ball, tense the muscles that throw the ball, but also at the same time tense the muscles that hold back? So you have this very unnatural way of throwing the ball, and you see this a lot of times with kids that are quote unquote trying to learn how to throw a ball, and they don't just right. They actually hold back, and that holding back is because of what they're thinking. It's because of what they're thinking, not because of what they're doing. And in fact, the body tension thing is a ridiculous notion, right? They tell you to relax. That's the worst thing you can tell a trumpet player is to relax, in my opinion. The worst thing you can tell a trumpet player is to relax. And the problem is some of those muscles need to not be relaxed. And It just creates a big mental mess when you approach it that way. What you need to do instead is have a totally single-minded approach to the trumpet. And here's what I believe, right? You can't have a totally single-minded approach to the trumpet if you're not living those priorities I've told you guys about in the past, right? If you're not living according to those priorities, you're going to have this kind of problem. Because when you get up to play, you're going to have issues, mental issues. Anyway, I won't go any more into that. Javier says, do you have any video or advice on trumpet effects? I did one specific video for an audition here in Texas. Now, the advice I have for effects really is that, for the most part, effects are... Now, I'm assuming you're talking about jazz effects. Most of the jazz effects fight against the horn. So they're going to have a naturally softer dynamic if you don't support them more than you support a note. Nobody's ever going to hear it. So like if you're doing like that first thing on the beginning of that big band tune, Pennsylvania 65000, right? You need to put more air, more support, more power into the effect than you do into that last note, or nobody's going to ever hear it, right? Same thing with all of them. Lip bends. If you don't support that and you just let it die, nobody's going to hear it. Same thing with falls. You have to push through the fall like a crescendo through the fall. Whether it's a lip fall, I teach 3 different kinds of falls, right? So you for salsa and very loud bands, rock bands, stuff like that, I almost always do a lip fall, which is basically a very fast lip slur, right? Then, depending on the style, I might do sometimes a half vowel fall, right? And once again, that's fighting against the horn. So you have to really push the air through that. And what's the last one? Oh, finger fall, right? The random finger fall. Same thing, that's fighting against the horn. So you have to really put the air through that. So that's my biggest advice for effects, is that you really put a lot of air into them, or nobody's ever going to know that you did it. Neo says, any system for learning the important scales, major, minor, melodic minor, harmonic minor, in all keys? I'm looking for a method that works systematically. So I have an approach to that. So let me summarize it real quick, right? Each one that you do, each scale that you do. Now, if it's not a new scale, then you shouldn't do this. That said, you know what? If it's not a new scale, but you've always, pardon my French, sucked at it, okay? I shouldn't say pardon my French, but pardon my language. I don't normally use the word suck, but if you've always been bad at a scale, sometimes that's because you never really learned it right in the first place. So in that case, this would apply. Let's go back to here and go through the steps. So number 1, for each scale, right? This is for each scale, you do expansion studies for that scale. And I Now that I've been doing the expansion studies with the students, I always did them myself. Now that I've been doing the expansion studies with my students and I've been actually making them do the whole 10 repetitions, I'm actually very convinced, extremely convinced, I don't know a better way to say that this is probably the most important aspect here. So basically, expansion studies are when you take the scale, and I'm just going to use C major for now. You take the scale, you play the first 2 notes, starting on the root, then up. Now, in my studies, I go down first because that way the book is for all levels. If you go up first and then down to the low notes, it can't be for all levels. So that's why I switched the order. I go down first, and when I get to F sharp, I start going back up again. So, and then I sing and finger. Do, do, do. Do, do, do. And I'm going to do that 10 times. When that's done, I'll add the A beneath it. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. I'm going to do that 10 times. Then to low G. Then we start adding notes in the other direction, up to D. And we're going to do each one of those 10 times. So yes, depending on your range, that's going to take a while. You know, I have some students that tell me that they don't practice, and I don't know how much we've talked about that here in the question answer. I don't have a problem with students that don't practice. Yes, I know that makes me very different. I can't teach those priorities and then expect students to practice every day or even every week. So I had to make a decision along the way, and this is also turned into something else along the way too. See, I believe in living the way that you, according to your beliefs, right? I think you should live according to your beliefs. So if I'm teaching my students to follow the priorities, and they come in and say, I didn't have time to practice, that's what I'm teaching them, is to not practice, really. So, anyway, so there's times when I do these expansion studies with the students in the lesson because they've told me that they're not practicing. So we do the practice stuff in their lesson. And it typically takes 2 lessons. Well, the person it takes about 2 lessons, so about 2 hours of doing these expansion studies to get a single scale finished. Okay? Now, number 2 is start doing the tonalization studies. Once you do the expansion for that key, you no longer have to do that again. Never go back to the expansion. And under that I put, unless you want to. I always tell the students, I have some students that really, really, really like the expansion studies. And so I had to add that to the end of it. Unless you really want to, but it's not part of the system. Okay, do the expansion studies as an introduction to the scale. Then you don't have to be introduced to it ever again. You've already done that. Okay, so then we go from there to the tonalization studies. By the way, you know what? Not everybody does my stuff in my lessons. Okay? Some students will come and all they want is to learn a song. And I'm not even making fun of that. It's true. I make it very clear on my website. Whatever it is you want to learn, that's what we're going to do. I'm not like a guru that says everybody that comes to me has to do my stuff. I'm here to help you. This is not about glorifying me. I'm here to help you. So I have a lot of students that have never done this. Now, the majority of my students have. I'm just saying. Now, number 3, and this is another very important part, and is to do the rotations. Be organized about which scales you do and when you do them. And we do that with a rotation schedule. Because remember, we're only doing one scale a day. When I say one scale a day, let's say one type of scale a day, because there has been some confusion about that. So let's say you're only doing major scales. No, you should not do F today and then F sharp 2. Because you have extra time, that's not good. So when I say one a day, I mean one per type. What I used to do in the old days is one, one tertian scale a day and one symmetric scale a day. Tertian, I think this is how you spell it. Tertian. And that's your major scales, your minor scales, your pentatonic scale, stuff like that. So I would do one of those a day and then one symmetric scale a day. Symmetric scales include chromatic, whole tone, diminished, augmented, and tritone scale. All right? I hope that makes sense. Okay? So that's my system. Okay, that's my system for learning scales, and it's a powerful system. Gabriel says, how do I check if my trumpet is in tune? Shall I use a tuner? And what note do I play to tune on the slide? So, Gabriel, the first answer to that question is the trumpet's a naturally out of tune instrument. If you put one note in tune, the other notes will be out of tune. That's one thing to always keep in mind with the intonation. And there's people that say always tune a little high as trumpet players, and people get get bent out of shape when you say that. How dare you play out of tune on purpose? And it's like they just don't understand that the trumpet is out of tune. So if you take one note and make it sharp on purpose, it's probably because you're trying to shift other notes to be a little bit closer to pitch. And that's what I do. I make I tune the C and I tune G. So, and I use an app on the phone. It's been a long time since I've had a standalone tuning app, a tuning device. So let me open it up and show you. So there's my tuning app. And I will remember you weren't here last week. I told everybody to look away, don't look at the tuner. That's about where I keep it. Just a little bit lower than what it says right now. Okay? like 1 or 2 notches high on purpose. Now, the people who get bent out of shape over that don't understand how the trumpet is built. They don't understand that the trumpet is out of tune, that the notes related to each other. That's why it's so ridiculous. These people that sell you a trumpet because it plays more in tune, there is no such thing as a trumpet that plays in tune. You would have to totally transform the science of a trumpet to make it play in tune. There's no such thing. What we do is we trade one problem for another problem, and maybe for some types of music or for some players or something, you might find a trumpet that works better for you in your circumstances. Okay? But but yes, I always put it just a tiny bit high, because that puts a lot of the other notes closer to where they need to be. I hope that makes sense. Okay, let me see here. Gabriel says, Neil, I love the book band expansion skills. Yes. So do you know what? I wrote that one. Band scale expansion studies, or something like that. I can't remember the name of my own book. Oh yeah, band scale expansion studies. I wrote that thinking that it wouldn't be appropriate outside of the country. Because, in fact, I thought it'd be inappropriate outside of Texas. Turns out that it's very much in alignment with the British schools. British, you know how they have their levels of testing and stuff like that. So it is in line with that, according to my South African friend Leonard. Leonard says it's right in line with that. Neil says, I meant a system to practice scales like for a year. How long should you stay in one key? I tried to switch daily, weekly, monthly, but I keep losing overview after some weeks. You know, I've done all 3 of those. I've done daily, and I'm talking for me, myself, and for my students. I've done daily, I've done weekly, I've done monthly. They are all equally beneficial, just for different reasons, right? Obviously, daily, you're going to get through more of them more often. And when I first started, I was doing the weekly, I think. I think I started with weekly. And from weekly, I went to daily. And then daily, I went to monthly. I did monthly for maybe 3 years, I think. It was an amazing experience. It was really amazing. The monthly thing. How well you get, how deep you can dive into that one key. But yes, I can't say that one is better than the other. What I will say is be consistent until you finish a cycle, right? So don't start as doing daily and then halfway through the cycle switch to monthly. Finish the cycle and then change what you want to change. Other than that, I really don't have a recommendation on that. Gabriel says maybe flugel is more tuned than trumpet. So that's not true either. The flugelhorn is just as bad. All of the brass instruments. It's the properties of the brass instrument. It's not it's not the relationship from the C to the B to the B flat to the A. That's not what we're talking about. It's the harmonics, right? If we're tuning according to equal temperament, we are going to be off. That's why it's called equal temperament. The natural tunings are, we can't have anything but natural tuning on the trumpet. I hope that makes sense. Hey, Anthony's back. Anthony says, just got back. I meant before about compression in trumpets. Yes, that's what I thought you meant. Did I get that wrong? Well, see, that's what I'm saying. So this one has no compression at all. This is my workhorse instrument, right? A lot going on with this instrument. And it's got very little compression on some of the valves. Anyway, what else? What other questions? We got to wrap this up in 4 minutes. You know, I woke up this morning thinking about, and I do stuff like this. I know I'm like a philosopher type person, but I opened up. I mean, I said opened up because I was looking at that. I woke up this morning and I was thinking about that whole joy of the Lord thing, right? And that's one of the pieces I'm recording right now anyway. Anyway, I'm not sure I should even be talking about that here. Just trying to fill space. Can you clean a trumpet with alcohol? Sure you can. I'm not sure how efficient that is, but I don't think it's going to do anything to hurt it. How do I rinse my trumpet? I just take the mouthpiece out, and because this is very loose, I will hold the weight of the horn on the saddle, and then I just put the water in, and I'll do one valve at a time. I'll push this valve and let the water come through. Then I'll put this finger here and push this valve and let the water come through. Then I'll do all 3 valves and let the water come through. Then I'll do this. And then, yeah, so that usually flushes everything out that needs to come out. James says, hello James, nice to see you again. I have no problem hearing when I am out of tune, but I have a trouble figuring out if I am flat or sharp, especially in low register. Any tips or exercises for ear training? Well, for that you're talking about specifically, I have sort of the same problem. As I get older, I can tell better, more automatically. But what I look for is signs, right? So, for example, if my E's, E flats, and D's are worse, if those are worse, then that's an indication that I'm probably flat. Because those notes are already flat to begin with. So if I'm playing those notes and they sound absolutely horrible, like quarter tone flat or something, then I know that I need to pull in, right? It's not likely, if I'm sharp, that those notes are going to sound bad. And same thing with the slide. If the note sounds atrocious with the slide in on the D, right? then that gives you an indication that you're probably sharp. I hope that makes sense. Now, the problem with notes in the low register is that there's no so in the higher notes we have a ceiling, right? And we can push up into that ceiling to keep the pitch stabilized. In the lower notes, that I don't know how to explain it. We go down to those notes. A lot of trumpet players call it, a lot of trumpet teachers call it over, what do they call it? Over adjusting. Over adjusting. So that, in other words, that they make their lips too open. The aperture is too open. The lips are too soft. Because they're overdoing it for those low notes. But hello, Raimo. It's nice to see you. He says the best tuning app he has that he's tested is called Harmonic Tuner. That's okay. Thanks for the recommendation. That would be nice to check that out. Okay. So anyway, when you're playing those low notes, it's very easy to let them slide down out of pitch. So that's one thing to keep in mind, is a lot of times those bottom notes are flat anyway because you're overcompensating for the fact that they are. Right? Because look how low we can bend it down and it not pop into a lower note. Right? That's ridiculous. But if you went to G, it pops down into the C. And we don't have that on those bottom notes. And it gives it sort of a bottomless feel. You know, it's like having that nightmare. I used to have a nightmare when I was a kid. I used to sleep in a bunk bed, and the nightmare was me getting out of the bunk bed and then stepping onto the floor, but there's no floor, and I'm falling, right? And that's what those low notes can be like, because there's no bottom. So what you have to do is hold up into the C, so it does. You know, that I don't know how to say that. You know, I'm kind of, I don't know. My mind is fuzzy today. Maybe I didn't drink enough water or something. So the words aren't coming out as clearly as I normally am. Anyway. All right, so we're... so James says overdoing low notes makes sense because he's often flat. Yes, that means... So, yes, try to... push the pitch up so that it's almost, it's going to feel like it's sharp, but it's not going to be sharp. I don't know a better way right now to say that. It's going to feel like it's sharp, but it's not going to be sharp. And a lot of it has to do with just holding your chops in position. That looking for the same word again. Overcompensating because it's low. Anyway, well, guys, I better get working on that chutney. So, thank you so much for hanging out. Thank you, Javier. You have a good weekend too. Raimo says, and the tuning app I am daily using with all my instruments is G strings. Okay, that's cool. Thank you. All right. God bless you guys. Great little hour that we did here. And we'll do another one next week. I do have some gigs coming up. I can't remember if any of them are on Friday and if they conflict with this or not. But I'll let you guys know in the future if that happens, all right? Okay, well, God bless you. We will see you on the next one. Have a great weekend. Bye.